My son-in-law stood in my kitchen and said, "Your house is perfect for my parents. They move in tomorrow." He thought grief made me weak. Thought I'd just pack up 42 years and disappear? He was wrong. What he didn't know was that while he was planning my exit, I was preparing something else entirely, something he'd never see coming. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comment section where you're watching from, so I'll know how far my story has gone.
You know that feeling when you walk into a room and forget why you came? That's what my life became after Sarah died. Except I never forgot, I just had nowhere left to go. Every morning I wake up at 5:47. Not because I set an alarm. The house wakes me. The furnace clicks on at 5:45, travels through the pipes Sarah and I installed in '96, and hums through the bedroom wall exactly 2 minutes later. For 42 years, that sound meant her hand would find mine under the quilt. Now it just means I'm still here. I'm Walter Harrison, 73, widower, woodworker, father to a daughter who used to call me every Sunday, back when Sundays meant something. The house in Maple Ridge doesn't feel big. It's a modest 2-story colonial, the kind you pass without looking twice. But when you're alone, square footage multiplies. The kitchen table seats 6. I use 1 chair. The living room couch fits 4. I sit in the same corner where Sarah used to curl up with her mystery novels, because if I sit anywhere else, it feels like I'm erasing her. Her lavender soap is still in the bathroom. I can't throw it away. Some mornings I open the cabinet just to breathe it in. Sharp, floral, unmistakably her. It's fading now. 3 years will do that. But I hold on to it the way drowning men hold on to driftwood. I tried keeping up her garden. Really, I did. She planted it the summer before the diagnosis. Roses, hydrangeas, that stubborn lilac bush that refuses to bloom unless you talk to it. Sarah swore by it. Tell them they're beautiful, Walter. Everything grows better when it's loved. I talk to the lilac every Wednesday. It hasn't bloomed since she left. The house is full of her, but it's the silence that gets me. We used to argue about the thermostat. She'd crank it to 74, I'd sneak it back down to 68. Now it sits at 74, and no one complains. I hear the clock in the hallway, the one we bought at that antique shop in New Haven on our 10th anniversary. Tick, tick, tick. It's the only voice in the house that never stopped talking. People tell me I should move on. Downsize, they say. You're rattling around in there, Walter. As if grief were a matter of square footage. As if packing up 42 years into boxes and loading them onto a truck would somehow make me whole again. I teach woodworking at the community center 3 days a week. It keeps my hands busy, keeps my mind from wandering into the rooms I've stopped using, the guest bedroom where Emma used to sleep, the attic where Sarah stored our Christmas decorations. I haven't opened those boxes since 2022. I'm not ready to see the ornaments she labeled in her looping handwriting. Baby's First Christmas, Vermont, 1995, Walter and Sarah.
Wednesday dinners used to be the bright spot. Emma would come by with Brad, her husband. We'd sit at the kitchen table, the one I built from reclaimed oak, and pretend everything was fine. But Brad never looked at me the way a son-in-law should. He looked at the crown molding, the refinished floors, the granite countertops Sarah picked out during her final good month. He looked at my home like it was an investment property. And Emma, she stopped meeting my eyes. I should have seen it coming. Brad arrived 17 minutes late, again. I had the pot roast in the oven by noon, the same recipe Sarah perfected over 30 years, the one Emma used to beg for every birthday. Carrots, onions, red potatoes, swimming in their own gravy. The kind of meal that makes a house smell like forgiveness. Emma walked in first, carrying that enormous leather tote she takes everywhere now. Designer something. Brad's taste, not hers. She kissed my cheek, quick, obligatory, and I caught the scent of perfume I didn't recognize. Not the vanilla one Sarah bought her in high school. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, sweetheart." Brad followed, phone pressed to his ear, nodding at me like I was the valet. He's 39, corporate attorney, the kind who wears a suit to Sunday dinner because he wants you to know he came from somewhere important. His handshake is the type that lingers a half-second too long, firm enough to remind you he's in control, but not warm enough to mean anything. Walter, not Dad, never Dad. Just my name, flat and transactional, like he was confirming an appointment. We sat at the table I built in 1989. Emma took her usual seat, the one facing the window where she used to watch for the school bus. Brad sat in Sarah's chair. He didn't ask, just pulled it out and sat down like it had always been his. I felt something crack in my chest, but I smiled through it the way you do when you've been disappointed too many times to make a scene. "This looks great, Walter," Emma said, serving herself a small portion, too small. She used to eat 2 helpings. Brad barely touched his plate. Instead, he pulled out a stack of glossy magazines, Architectural Digest, Better Homes and Gardens, and spread them across the table like he was closing a deal. "So, Walter," he said, leaning back in Sarah's chair, fingers laced behind his head, "Jennifer and I have been doing some thinking." Jennifer, his mother, the woman who once told Sarah our house had charm, in the same tone people use to describe yard sales. "You're living in a lot of space for one person. And honestly, the market's not getting any younger. Neither are you." Emma's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What Brad means," she started. "What I mean," he interrupted, "is that this house is perfect for my parents. My dad is retiring from the firm in Boston. They need something turnkey. Updated, good bones." He rapped his knuckles on the table like he was testing the wood. "My wood. You've kept it in great shape." I felt my jaw tighten. "I appreciate that. They're moving in tomorrow." The words landed like a glass shattering on tile. Sharp, final, impossible to take back. I looked at Emma. She was staring at her plate, fork abandoned, shoulders curved inward like she was trying to disappear. "Tomorrow?" I repeated. "I've already arranged the movers," Brad said, scrolling through his phone now, not even looking at me. "Golden Acres has an opening in their independent living wing, chess club, shuffleboard, the whole 9 yards. You'll love it. Honestly, Walter, you'll thank us." Emma's voice came out small, broken. "Dad, it's for the best. You'll see." She still wouldn't look at me. I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug, the one that says "World's Best Grandpa," a gift from Emma when she still called me that, and I held on like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Brad smiled. "So we're all on the same page?" I didn't answer. But in the silence, in the hum of that hallway clock and the ghost of Sarah's lavender soap still lingering in the air, something inside me shifted. I wasn't on his page. I was writing my own. The pot roast sat between us, cooling, untouched. Steam rose from it like the ghosts of dinners past, birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings, the ordinary Sundays when family still meant something. Brad was still talking. He never really stopped. "Golden Acres is actually a premium facility," he said, thumbing through his phone with the casual indifference of someone ordering takeout. "They've got a full activities calendar. Movie nights, bridge tournaments. There's even a wood shop. Granted, it's supervised for safety reasons, but still, you'll fit right in." Supervised. As if I were a child who couldn't be trusted with his own tools. I'd been working with wood since before Brad was born, building furniture that would outlast his leather briefcase and his carefully managed retirement portfolio. "We toured it last month, Dad," Emma added quietly.
Her voice had that pleading quality, the one she used to use when she was 7 and trying to convince me that staying up past bedtime wasn't really breaking the rules. You toured it. The words came out flatter than I intended. We wanted to make sure it was nice, really nice. Without asking me. Brad waved his hand dismissively. Walter, let's be realistic. You're 73. This house is, 3,000 square feet? The maintenance alone. I manage just fine. For now. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. And I saw it then. The look, the one that said he'd already won, that this conversation was a formality, a courtesy he was extending to the old man who didn't know any better. But what about next year? 5 years from now? You think Emma wants to worry about you falling down these stairs, having a medical emergency with nobody around? Emma flinched. Brad! It's the truth, honey. He reached over and squeezed her hand. Protective. Possessive. We're thinking about your father's well-being. My well-being. As if they'd spent sleepless nights worrying about me instead of calculating square footage and property values. The movers are coming at 8 a.m., Brad continued, his tone shifting into what I imagined he used in courtrooms. Confident, immovable, already anticipating your surrender. They'll handle everything. We've even arranged for a senior transition specialist to help you pack the essentials. The rest we can put in storage or donate, Emma whispered. The word hit me like a fist. Donate. Sarah's china cabinet, the rocking chair where I held Emma through colicky nights, the bookshelf I'd built with wood from the oak tree that fell during the blizzard of '03, the bedroom furniture Sarah and I saved for, month by month, when we were newlyweds, and every dollar mattered. Donate. We're not trying to be cruel, Brad said, and I almost laughed because cruelty delivered with a smile is still cruelty. We're trying to be practical. My parents need a place. You need care. It's a win-win. A win-win. As if life were a negotiation. As if 42 years could be boxed up and replaced with shuffleboard and supervised woodworking. I looked at Emma. Really looked at her. Searching for the little girl who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms, who made me dandelion crowns and called them treasure. The woman sitting across from me had her mother's eyes but none of her fight. Emma, I said softly, do you want this? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Her eyes glistened, but she wouldn't let the tears fall. Not in front of Brad. I want you to be safe, Dad. Safe. The refuge of people who'd stopped living. Brad stood up, buttoning his suit jacket like the meeting had adjourned. We'll let you sleep on it, but the timeline's locked in. Jennifer's already chosen paint colors for the master bedroom. Something neutral. She's thinking a warm beige. Warm beige. For the room where Sarah died. Where I still slept on my side of the bed. Unable to cross that invisible line. He grabbed his keys. Emma followed, moving like a woman underwater. Slow and suffocating. At the door, she turned back. I love you, Dad. But she left anyway. The house settled into silence again. The furnace, the clock, the settling of old wood that knew how to hold weight. I sat alone at the table, staring at the cold pot roast, and felt something ignite deep in my chest. Not rage. Not yet. Resolution. They thought tomorrow was the end of my story? They were wrong. Tomorrow was when I'd start writing theirs. I didn't sleep. The house has a rhythm at night, creaks and whispers that most people never notice. But when you've lived somewhere for 42 years, you learn its language. The third step on the staircase sighs under weight. The bathroom pipes sing a low note around midnight. The window in the guest room rattles when the wind comes from the east. That night, I heard every sound. I walked through the rooms like a ghost haunting his own life. Started in the kitchen where Sarah used to hum while doing dishes. Off-key, always a half beat behind the radio. Moved to the living room where Emma took her first steps, arms outstretched, wobbling toward me with that fearless trust only children have. The house remembered everything I was trying to forget. Around 2 a.m., I found myself in the bedroom, standing in front of Sarah's dresser. Her jewelry box still sat there. Cheap costume pieces mostly, nothing Brad would consider valuable. A pearl necklace I bought her on our 20th anniversary. Earrings Emma made in art class, lopsided and perfect. I opened the top drawer. Her scarves were folded the way she always kept them, organized by color, soft as whispers. Beneath them, a stack of photos held together with a rubber band that had long since lost its snap. I pulled one out. Sarah and Emma at the beach, Cape Cod, summer of 1998. Emma was 6, gap-toothed and sunburned, holding up a sand dollar like she'd discovered buried treasure. Sarah was laughing, her hair wild with salt air, one arm wrapped around our daughter. They looked so happy, so certain that the world was safe. I set the photo on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, my side, always my side, and felt the full weight of what Brad had stolen with his glossy magazines and his timeline. Not just a house, my last fortress against forgetting. The clock in the hallway struck 3. Tick, tick, tick. The same rhythm it had kept since 1993, when Sarah surprised me with it, wrapped in newspaper because we couldn't afford proper wrapping paper back then. "You're gonna think I'm crazy," she said, grinning. "But I walked past that antique shop every day for a month, and this clock just, I don't know, it felt like us. Steady, built to last." I kissed her forehead and told her it was perfect. She was right. It was us. And now Brad wanted to paint over us with warm beige. I picked up Sarah's photo again, traced the outline of her smile with my thumb. "They think I'm done," I whispered to her. "Think I'm just going to roll over and let them erase us." The house was quiet, but I swear I felt her answer in the way the furnace hummed through the walls, in the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. "So, show them." I stood up, steadier than I'd felt in 3 years, and walked to the closet, pulled down the old wooden toolbox from the top shelf, the one I'd built in 1981, dovetailed joints tight as promises. Inside, plans I'd sketched, measurements I'd saved, the blueprint of a life I'd spent decades constructing. Sarah used to tease me. "You solve everything with wood and nails, Walter." She wasn't wrong. I spread the plans across the bed and studied them under the dim lamplight, my mind already working through angles and sequences, the geometry of consequences. Brad wanted my house? Fine. But he didn't know what came with it. I glanced at Sarah's photo one last time. "Guess it's time to build again, sweetheart." This time, I wasn't building furniture. I was building a reckoning.
I didn't waste time being angry. Anger is fuel that burns fast and leaves nothing but ash. What I needed was something slower, steadier, the kind of heat that transforms raw wood into something beautiful and permanent. By 4 a.m., I was in the garage. Sarah and I used to joke that the garage was my second home. Workbench along the back wall, tools hung on pegboard with outlines traced in marker, so I'd always know where they belonged. Sawdust permanently embedded in the concrete floor, no matter how many times I swept. But I wasn't there for the tools. Not yet. I was there for the boxes. They were stacked in the corner, sealed with packing tape that had yellowed with age. Sarah's handwriting on the labels, garden records, warranty papers, legal documents, the practical archive of a life we'd built together, one receipt and mortgage payment at a time. I pulled down the box marked House, Original. Inside, the original deed from 1983. Inspection reports, the survey map showing property lines, building permits for every renovation, the kitchen in 2001, the roof in 1919, the electrical upgrade that cost us a vacation to Florida but kept the house safe. And beneath all of that, something I'd almost forgotten. The letter. It was dated March 15th, 1983, typed on the kind of onion skin paper lawyers don't use anymore. From the estate attorney handling Sarah's grandmother's will. The house hadn't been a purchase, not entirely. It was a gift passed down through Sarah's family with one very specific condition embedded in the deed transfer. I read it 3 times, slowly, the way you read something that changes the shape of your future. Then I smiled. Brad was a lawyer, a good one probably, but he'd made the mistake arrogant men always make. He'd assumed I was simple, that a retired woodworker who taught community center classes didn't understand contracts, clauses, or the fine print that holds a life together. He was wrong. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into my shirt pocket, and moved to the next box. Sarah's projects. She'd been a planner, my Sarah. Had notebooks full of ideas, garden layouts, room redesigns, dreams she never got to finish. I opened the box and found them, 3 spiral-bound notebooks, pages filled with her looping handwriting and hand-drawn sketches. One entry stopped me cold. Renovation ideas if we ever downsize. Dated 2019, just months before the diagnosis. She had written, "If something happens to me, Walter will rattle around this house like a marble in a shoebox, but he'll never leave, not unless someone makes him. So if that day comes, I want him to remember this house isn't just walls and floors. It's protection. Make sure whoever tries to take it knows what they're walking into." My throat tightened. She knew it. Somehow she'd known. I closed the notebook and placed it gently back in the box, then pulled out my phone. The screen glowed harsh in the dark garage, but my hands were steady. First call, Mitchell & Horn, the law firm that handled Sarah's grandmother's estate. I left a voicemail requesting they pull the original deed transfer and send me certified copies of all covenant clauses. Second call, Apex Property Inspections. I scheduled a full structural review for later that morning. Foundation, electrical, plumbing, the works. Third call, my nephew, Calvin, who worked in county records. I asked him to pull the permit history for the house and flag any code violations filed in the last 5 years. There weren't any. I'd made sure of that. But Brad's parents? They wouldn't know that. Not yet. By the time the sun started creeping through the garage window, I had a list. 12 items handwritten on the back of one of Sarah's old garden sketches. Some were legal, some were practical, some were the kind of thing you only learn after spending 42 years maintaining a house that refuses to quit on you. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I wasn't breaking laws or crossing lines. I was simply making sure that when Brad's parents moved in tomorrow, they'd get exactly what they asked for. A house with good bones and everything that came with it. I stepped out of the garage as the first light hit the driveway, toolbox in one hand, list in the other. The movers would arrive in 4 hours. I had work to do.
They pulled up at 7:53 a.m. in a truck with Premier Relocations painted on the side in letters too fancy for what they actually did. Load someone's life into cardboard and drive away. 3 guys. Early 20s, maybe? The kind who wore work gloves but hadn't earned the calluses yet.
The crew chief had a clipboard, and that rehearsed look of sympathy people wear when they think they're dismantling someone's last stand. I was waiting on the porch. Fresh coffee in a thermos, box of donuts from Millstone Bakery, the glazed ones, still warm. The crew chief climbed out first, adjusting his ball cap. "Mr. Harrison?" "That's me." He glanced at his clipboard, then back at me, clearly expecting tears or resistance or the desperate bargaining of a man clinging to the past. "We're here to facilitate the transition. Mr. Mitchell said you'd been informed of the timeline." "Oh, I'm informed." I smiled and held up the thermos. "Coffee? It's a long job. Figured you'd need the fuel." He blinked. Thanks?" I poured 3 cups and handed out the donuts while they exchanged confused looks. People aren't supposed to be kind when you're evicting them from their own life. "Listen," I said, leaning against the porch railing, casual as Sunday morning. "I know you guys are just doing your job. No hard feelings. But I do need to handle some paperwork before we get started." The crew chief flipped through his clipboard. "Mr. Mitchell already signed the work order." "I'm sure he did. But the house is still in my name. Legally, I need to authorize the removal of certain items, especially anything with historical or structural value." I pulled a folded paper from my shirt pocket, official looking, dense with text. "Insurance purposes, you understand." He squinted at it, clearly out of his depth. "I guess that makes sense." "Great. Come on in. I'll walk you through the inventory." They followed me inside, boots heavy on the hardwood Sarah and I had refinished in '09. I led them to the dining room where I'd spent the last 3 hours preparing. The table was covered with documents, neat stacks labeled with sticky notes, foundation records, electrical history, plumbing permits, warranty information. And in the center, a hand-drawn map of the house with specific items circled in red ink. "Now," I said, settling into my chair like a professor at a lectern, "let's go over what can and cannot be removed without violating structural integrity clauses." One of the younger movers whispered to his buddy, "Is this normal?" The crew chief shot him a look. "Mr. Harrison, we're just here to move furniture." "Of course, but some of this furniture is load-bearing." I pointed to the built-in bookcase in the living room. "That unit? Custom designed to distribute weight from the second-floor office. Remove it incorrectly, and you're looking at wall separation. I'm not saying don't move it. I'm saying you'll need a structural engineer to supervise." His face paled. "A structural engineer? I've got one on call. He can be here in 90 minutes. I slid a business card across the table. "Happy to wait." Mr. Mitchell didn't mention. Mr. Mitchell doesn't live here. I do. For now. The crew chief pulled out his phone, stepping into the hallway. I heard him murmuring, "Yeah, we've got a situation." While he called Brad, panicked, confused, already behind schedule, I poured myself another coffee and looked around the room. The house hummed softly, the furnace kicking on, right on schedule. I raised my cup in a silent toast. This wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. And we were just getting started.
She showed up alone around noon, while the movers were on their second consultation break, and the crew chief was still on hold with Brad's office. I saw her through the kitchen window, sitting in her car for a full 5 minutes before finally getting out. She walked up the driveway the way she used to approach my workshop after breaking something as a kid. Slow steps, shoulders hunched, rehearsing apologies she wasn't sure would land. I opened the door before she knocked. "Hey, sweetheart." "Hey, Dad." Her voice cracked on the second word. We stood there in the doorway, the space between us filled with everything we weren't saying. Finally, she stepped inside,
And I saw it, the redness around her eyes, the tissue balled up in her fist. "I'm sorry," she said, immediately, the words tumbling out. "I'm so sorry. Brad said it would be quick, painless, that you'd adjust, and—" She stopped, shaking her head. "That's not true. I knew. I knew you wouldn't want this, and I didn't stop him." I guided her to the couch, not Sarah's spot, but close. "You want some tea?" "Dad, I don't want tea. I want—" She wiped her eyes, frustrated with herself. "I want to fix this, but I don't know how." I sat across from her in the chair I'd built from reclaimed barnwood, the one that creaked when you shifted weight. "You think I'm angry with you? Aren't you?" "No." And I meant it. "I'm disappointed, but those aren't the same thing." She flinched like I'd slapped her. Maybe disappointment cuts deeper than anger. Anger fades. Disappointment lingers. "Brad said it was practical," she whispered, "that we were helping you. I wanted to believe him because believing him was easier than—" She gestured around the room, at the walls that still held her height marks from childhood, at the mantel where her school photos stood in mismatched frames. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Emma, you're not a child anymore. You haven't been for a long time. So I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to really think about the answer." She nodded, throat working. "Whose life are you living? Yours or his?" The silence stretched long enough that I heard the hallway clock mark 3 full minutes. "I don't know anymore," she finally said. I reached over and squeezed her hand, the same hand I used to hold crossing streets, the same hand that made me Father's Day cards with glitter that never fully vacuumed out of the carpet. "Then maybe it's time you figured that out." She left 20 minutes later, no less conflicted, but maybe, just maybe a little more awake. As her car disappeared down the street, I returned to the dining room where the movers were still waiting, still stalled, still trapped in the web of permits and protocols I'd spent all morning spinning. I picked up my coffee, now cold, and stared at the paperwork. Sometimes people need to see what they've built before they understand what they've broken. The house settled around me, agreeing.
Brad's parents arrived at 2:30 in a silver Lexus that looked like it had never seen a parking lot with actual lines. Jennifer Mitchell stepped out first, 60-something, helmet of blonde hair that hadn't moved since the Reagan administration, wearing white linen that screamed, "I don't do my own laundry." Her husband, Philip, followed. Tall, gray temples, the kind of handshake that compensated for whatever he lacked in personality. Brad trailed behind with a realtor named Stephanie who wore too much perfume and carried an iPad like a sacred text. "Walter," Brad said, not quite meeting my eyes. "My parents wanted to see the house before the final move." "Of course," I smiled, wiping my hands on a rag. "Welcome. I'm just finishing up some last-minute touch-ups." Jennifer's gaze swept the foyer with the precision of someone mentally calculating resale value. "It's quaint." 42 years of memories tend to accumulate, I said. "But I think you'll find everything's in excellent condition. Let me give you the tour." I led them through the living room first, where sunlight filtered through the windows Sarah had insisted we enlarge in '98. "Original hardwood," I said, tapping my foot on the floor. "Refinished in 2009, sealed with 3 coats of polyurethane. Should last another 20 years, easy." Philip nodded approvingly. Stephanie typed notes. "Now the thermostat's here," I continued, gesturing to the wall unit. "Programmable, set to 74 degrees, which I've found is the optimal temperature for this house. Drop it lower and the pipes in the upstairs bathroom sing a bit. Nothing structural, just character." Jennifer's smile tightened. "Singing pipes?" "Old houses talk," I said pleasantly. "You get used to it." We moved to the kitchen.
I pointed out the granite countertops, the updated appliances, the custom cabinetry I'd built myself. Everything's functional, though I should mention, the garbage disposal is a bit sensitive. You have to run cold water for exactly 30 seconds after use, or it tends to back up into the dishwasher. Simple fix once you get the rhythm. Stephanie's typing slowed. Back up? Only if you forget the 30-second rule, I smiled. I've timed it for years, never had a problem. Brad's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Upstairs, I showed them the master bedroom, Sarah's room, our room, where Jennifer immediately started measuring windows with her eyes. Beautiful light, she said. It is. Though, fair warning, the window in the east corner doesn't latch properly unless you lift and jiggle. Contractor said it's the frame settling. Nothing dangerous, just quirky. I've been meaning to fix it, but honestly, I got used to the way the wind whistles through on September nights. Sounds like the ocean. Philip frowned. The frame is settling? Has been for 15 years. Hasn't fallen out yet. I chuckled like this was charming. By the time we reached the basement, Brad's parents were exchanging glances. Jennifer kept touching her pearls, the universal sign of upper-middle-class anxiety. Now the circuit breaker is here, I said, opening the panel. All labeled. Though I should mention, the dryer and the microwave share a circuit. Run them both at the same time and you'll trip the whole kitchen. Easy reset. Just flip this switch here. Happens maybe twice a week. Twice a week? Jennifer's voice climbed an octave. Unless you plan ahead, Sarah and I had a system. Brad stepped forward, forced cheer cracking at the edges. I'm sure we can get an electrician. Oh, absolutely, I agreed. Permit shouldn't take more than a few weeks. County's backed up this time of year. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Stephanie closed her iPad. Mr. Mitchell, perhaps we should discuss— It's a lovely home, I interrupted gently. Just needs someone who understands her. Jennifer looked at Philip. Philip looked at Brad. And for the first time since Sunday dinner, I saw something crack behind his eyes. Not anger. Doubt.
The call came the next morning. Brad showed up without warning. No Emma this time. Just him and a fury that made his lawyer composure crack like cheap veneer. He didn't knock, just barged through the door I'd left unlocked, waving a stack of papers like they were evidence in a murder trial. "What the hell is this, Walter?" I was at the kitchen table, finishing my coffee, the real stuff, not the decaf they serve at Golden Acres. I looked up slowly, calmly, the way you look at a thunderstorm from inside a solid house. "Good morning to you too, Brad." "Don't!" He slammed the papers on the table. County records, deed transfer documents, legal filings dated and notarized. "Don't play dumb with me. You transferred the house?" "I did." "When?" 6 months ago, right after Sarah's estate finally settled. I took another sip of coffee. "You want some? Fresh pot?" His face went red. "You transferred it to a trust, a charitable trust. The Sarah Harrison Memorial Trust for Foster Youth Housing. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" He stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. You gave away a $3 million property?" 2.7, according to the appraisal, but who's counting? Brad pulled out a chair and collapsed into it. Papers scattered across the table between us. For a moment, he just sat there, breathing hard, trying to reassemble the narrative he'd built in his head, the one where I was a confused old man who didn't understand real estate or legacy planning. "Why?" he finally asked. I set down my mug and met his eyes. Because Sarah and I always wanted to do something that mattered. We talked about it for years, what we'd leave behind when we were gone. She worked in social services before Emma was born. Did you know that? He didn't answer. She saw kids, good kids, get shuffled through the system, never having a place that felt like home,
just temporary stops with temporary people. This house? It was ours, but it was also supposed to be more than just ours. So you just gave it away to spite me? No, Brad. I gave it away to honor her. There's a difference. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared, copies of everything, organized the way Sarah used to organize her garden records. The trust takes full ownership in 90 days. During that time, I remain here as a resident caretaker while they transition the property. After that, it becomes a rotating foster home for teenagers aging out of the system. 6 beds, supervised but independent. A place where they can learn to build a life. His mouth opened, closed. You could have just said no. I did say no, Brad. You just didn't hear me. After he left, I sat alone in the kitchen. The same kitchen where Sarah and I had shared 10,000 meals, where we'd planned our lives in the margins of mortgage payments and modest dreams. The house hummed around me, settling into its new purpose. Sarah's lavender soap was nearly gone now, just a sliver left in the bathroom cabinet. But her memory? That was permanent, built to last.
Brad called an emergency meeting. That's what he called it, an emergency meeting, like we were shareholders instead of family, like he could corporate speak his way out of what he'd tried to do. He scheduled it for Saturday afternoon at my house. His house, he probably still thought. Invited his parents, the realtor Stephanie, even Emma, who arrived looking like she hadn't slept in days. They gathered in the living room, Jennifer perched on the edge of the couch, Philip standing with arms crossed, Stephanie clutching her iPad like it might protect her from the awkwardness. Brad paced near the fireplace, tie loosened, that polished veneer finally showing cracks. Emma sat alone by the window, staring at the garden Sarah had planted. Walter, Brad began, voice tight with forced professionalism. I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding. My attorney reviewed the deed transfer, and while it's technically valid, I believe we can make a case for undue influence, or undue influence. I stayed seated in my chair, the one I had built, calm as Sunday morning. You mean someone pressured me into giving away my own property? You weren't in the right state of mind, grief, isolation. I was in the exact right state of mind. I pulled out the folder, thicker now, filled with everything I'd gathered over 6 months. I stood and placed the folder on the coffee table, opening it so everyone could see. Here's the psychiatric evaluation I requested from Dr. Patricia Nguyen at Hartford Medical, dated March 10th, confirms full cognitive function and decision-making capacity. I flipped to the next page. Here's the letter of intent I filed with the county, outlining my wishes for the property, witnessed by 3 independent parties, none of whom are related to me. Jennifer leaned forward, squinting at the documents. This is dated months ago. 6 months ago, I confirmed, right around the time Brad started making comments about how much space I was wasting. Brad's face went pale. You can't prove... I don't need to prove anything. The transfer is legal, filed, and irreversible. I looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. This house was built for family, real family, the kind that shows up when you're broken, not when you're profitable. Sarah and I spent 42 years making this place a home, not an asset, not an investment property, a home. My voice didn't rise, didn't need to. You looked at these walls and saw square footage. You looked at my grief and saw opportunity. You thought because I was old and alone, I wouldn't fight back. I paused, letting the weight settle. You were wrong. Emma stood suddenly, tears streaming down her face. Dad! It's okay, sweetheart. I smiled at her the same smile I gave her when she was 7 and scraped her knee learning to ride a bike. This isn't about punishing anyone. It's about making sure this house becomes what it is always meant to be, a place where people who need family
can find it. Stephanie quietly closed her iPad. Philip shifted uncomfortably. Jennifer looked anywhere but at me. Brad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The trust takes full ownership in 83 days, I said, closing the folder. Until then, I'm staying right here. And after that, I glanced at Sarah's photo on the mantel. After that, this house will be full again, with kids who need to know what home feels like. I picked up my coffee mug, the world's best grandpa one, and walked toward the kitchen. Meeting adjourned.
She came back the next morning, alone. I was in the backyard, kneeling by Sarah's garden, trying to coax life back into the flower beds that had gone wild without her. The lilac bush still refused to bloom, stubborn as ever. Emma didn't say anything at first, just stood at the edge of the garden, holding 2 flats of purple hydrangeas, Sarah's favorite. I remember when Mom planted the first ones, she said quietly. I was 8. She let me dig the holes. You dug 'em too shallow. We had to replant 'em the next day. A small laugh escaped her, watery and broken. I thought I'd killed them. Your mother said there's no such thing as killing something that wants to live. You just have to give it another chance. Emma set down the flats and knelt beside me in the dirt. Her designer jeans would stain. The old Emma would have cared about that. This Emma didn't seem to notice. I'm so sorry, Dad. Her voice cracked. I knew what Brad was doing. I knew. And I told myself it was practical, that we were helping you. But the truth is, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of soil across her cheek. The truth is, I was scared. Of what? Of being the bad guy, of choosing you over him, of admitting I married someone who sees people as transactions. She picked up one of the hydrangeas, cradling it like something fragile. Mom would be so ashamed of me. I stopped digging and looked at her, really looked at her. Saw the little girl who used to bring me dandelions like they were diamonds. Saw the woman who'd gotten lost somewhere between loving me and trying to keep peace in a marriage that demanded she choose. Your mother, I said slowly, would tell you the same thing she told those hydrangeas. There's no such thing as killing something that wants to live. Emma's shoulder shook. I put down my trowel and pulled her into a hug, the kind I used to give her after nightmares, when the world felt too big and scary. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered against my shoulder. You're here. That's a start. We spent the next 2 hours planting. She dug the holes, deeper this time, the right depth. I showed her how to loosen the roots, give them room to spread. We worked in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing someone's rhythms. By noon, Sarah's garden looked alive again. Not perfect, but growing. Emma stood back, dirt under her fingernails, hair falling loose from its clip. Do you think they'll bloom? I looked at the hydrangeas, then at the lilac bush that had stayed silent for 3 years. I think, I said, they'll bloom when they're ready. Same as everything else. She squeezed my hand, and for the first time in months, the house felt less empty. The first kids moved in on a Tuesday in late September. 3 of them initially. Marcus was 17, aging out of his 4th placement. Lily was 16, quiet as snow, with eyes that had seen too much. And Troy, 15, who covered his fear with jokes and a laugh that didn't quite reach his face. They stood in the foyer with trash bags holding everything they owned, looking around like they were waiting for the catch. There's always a catch when you've been disappointed enough times. Welcome home, I said.
Troy snorted. Yeah, sure. Fair enough. Words are cheap. I'd have to prove it. The first week was careful. They moved through the house like ghosts, touching nothing, claiming nothing, waiting for me to tell them the rules that would make this place feel like every other temporary stop. I didn't give them rules. I gave them dinner. Pot roast. Sarah's recipe. My wife used to make this every Sunday, I said, setting the dish on the table. The same table where Brad had announced his plans, where Emma used to do homework, where 42 years of meals had been shared. She believed you couldn't really know someone until you'd broken bread with them. Lily took the smallest portion. Marcus ate like he wasn't sure there'd be a next meal. Troy watched me the whole time, suspicious. So, what's the deal, old man? You some kind of saint or something? No, I said honestly. I'm just someone who knows what it's like when a house stops feeling like home. Figured maybe I could help change that. By October, things shifted. Marcus started joining me in the garage, watching me work on a bookshelf for Lily's room. Then watching became asking questions. Then asking became holding the wood steady while I cut. Then holding became building. Your hands remember faster than your brain, I told him, showing him how to feel the grain. Trust them. He made a small box, dovetailed joints. Not perfect, but his. I never made anything before, he said, running his fingers over the wood. Now you have. Lily planted flowers in Sarah's garden. Didn't ask permission, just did it. I found her out there one morning, kneeling in the dirt, talking to the lilac bush the way Sarah used to. It bloomed 2 weeks later. Troy's laugh started reaching his eyes. The house filled with sounds I'd forgotten, footsteps on the stairs, music from bedrooms, arguments over whose turn it was to do dishes, the living sounds of people who were learning what it meant to stay. Emma visited every Wednesday. Sometimes she'd bring dinner. Sometimes she'd just sit in the garden Lily was tending, helping pull weeds, finding her way back to herself. One evening, as the sun set orange through the kitchen window, Marcus looked up from his homework and said, "Hey, Walter, thanks, for this." I smiled, hearing Sarah's voice in the hum of the furnace, in the tick of the hallway clock, in the laughter drifting down from upstairs. "Thank you," I said, "for bringing it back to life." The house had always had good bones. Now it had heart again, too. People always ask me what I was preparing. They think it was revenge, some elaborate scheme to humiliate Brad, to teach him a lesson about greed and entitlement. They want the story to be about an old man outsmarting the villain, about justice served cold and calculated. But that's not what it was. Not really. When Brad said, "Your house is perfect for my parents, they move in tomorrow," something inside me did shift. But it wasn't anger that moved me to action. It was clarity. For 3 years after Sarah died, I'd been preparing to fade, preparing to become smaller, quieter, to take up less space in a world that felt too big without her. I moved through rooms like a man haunting his own life, touching things that reminded me of what I'd lost, unable to imagine what could still be built. Brad didn't take anything from me that night. He woke something up. The preparation started in that garage at 4 a.m, surrounded by boxes labeled in Sarah's handwriting. But it wasn't paperwork I was preparing. It was permission. Permission to let the house become something more than a museum of memories. Permission to believe that what Sarah and I built could matter beyond just us. I prepared the legal documents, yes, filed the trust paperwork, secured the evaluations, made sure everything was ironclad. But that was just scaffolding. What I was really preparing was my heart. preparing to open doors I'd kept closed, preparing to hear footsteps on stairs that had been silent, preparing to let strangers become family in the spaces where my family had been. Sarah used to say, "A house is just wood and nails until you fill it with people who need it." I'd forgotten that. Grief has a way of making you forget that love isn't finite, that opening your home doesn't mean replacing what you lost. It means honoring it. So when Brad's parents walked through those rooms, pointing out quirks and flaws, I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was showing them the truth. This house wasn't meant for people who saw it as an acquisition. It was meant for people who needed it to be a home. The singing pipes, the temperamental garbage disposal, the window that whistles in September. Those aren't problems. They're personality. They're the accumulated life of a place that's been lived in, loved in, survived in. Marcus understands that now. He listens to the house the way I do, knows when the furnace is about to kick on, has learned which floorboards creak and which ones stay silent. He's building a life here, one careful measurement at a time. Lily tends Sarah's garden like it's sacred ground, because it is. Troy makes jokes at dinner, and the house fills with laughter again. Different laughter than Emma's childhood giggles, but no less precious. Emma comes by every week. Sometimes she brings Brad. He doesn't say much, but he helps with repairs now. Watch his Marcus in the workshop. Maybe learning, finally, what it means to build instead of acquire. So when people ask what I was preparing that night, I tell them the truth. I wasn't preparing to fight. I was preparing to live again, preparing to honor Sarah by doing what we always dreamed, turning our home into a place where family isn't about blood or obligation, but about showing up, about staying, about making something permanent out of love. The house still hums at night. The clock still ticks in the hallway. But now when I walk through these rooms, they don't echo with emptiness. They echo with purpose. And that's exactly what I prepared for.
So here's my question for you. Was I right to handle it this way? Tell me in the comments below, what would you have done in my position? If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more real-life tales, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Because trust me, there's so much more on this channel. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next life story.